It is the Jim and Terry Show coming to you from the Hobbit Hole Studio in Bobcaygeon. I'm one of your hosts, Terry, and Jim is still in the empty seat. He will be here in a day or so. We have conversations around coffee, two retired guys with a lot to chinwag about, and stuff that we find interesting because we come from two diverse backgrounds. Jim is a businessman, and I'm a career teacher. We're both retired. He's usually leaning conservative on most things, financial, economic, and values-based, and I tend to be progressive and liberal and look at things when I say WWJD, what would Jesus do? It's usually from a left-leaning perspective, believing that Jesus was anything but a conservative. He was more radical than even a liberal, and more progressive than most. So here's my framework of understanding. The Jim and Terry Show is a mixture of two people. You can read it on our podcast site where I document our history. I'm a unionist advocating for labor rights, and Jim is a private businessman who says, down with labor. Well, maybe not exactly that succinctly, but, that owners have rights and responsibilities, and owners are the ones who will trickle down the benefits of their whatever provincial or federal government policies will enable businesses to be successful. That's a good thing, and it's a good thing to lower tax rates on the enormously wealthy, because they generate the jobs for everybody else. And to which I would argue, of course, that trickle-down economics has never worked. And you can Google that if you're not sure whether that claim holds up or not. Where does all this go? Well, it goes to me tackling some issues that maybe have a spiritual dimension. I always say that politics is spirituality applied. Prove to me your faith by the policies you support. And if your policies oppress people, if your policies do not feed the poor, clothe the widows and the orphans, if you do not deal with the people who are the lowly in life, who need a help, need a hand up, if your policies put people down, if you beat people up through your policies and you force them to be poor in perpetuity, then I'd say there's something of a deficit in your spiritual walk. That being said, let's talk about the current movements in both Canada and the United States to, and I will use the American word, Rededicate 250. Of course, it's the 250th year of America's War of Independence, 1776. And we know how Trump feels about all this stuff because he keeps linking $1.776 billion slush fund to be discretionarily applied to people who are the victims of what they claim to be malicious judicial oppression, which most of us would say if you've been tried in a court, convicted by peers or a judge and found guilty and sentenced, that's enough to prove that you are guilty of something. You violated the law. There's enough evidence to convict you. As opposed to Trump, who comes along, pardons everybody from the January 6th. What, 1,500 pardons? 1,700 pardons? Yeah, now these people are eligible to tap into taxpayer-funded $1.776 billion. Now, there's something screwy about all this stuff. And there's stuff that I don't find to be biblical or Christian at all. So let's take a look at what's happening. It happened, I think, this past weekend. It's called Rededicate 250, which, let's start with what my good friend Jim would always say, follow the money trail, because that's where you'll find political influence. So who funded Rededicate 250, which I think was held in Washington, in the Capitol, because I can see a photograph with a big stage and pillars, and I can see the Washington Monument in the background. So somewhere there. And in the picture, you see, what looks like a fair crowd. And I haven't seen an estimate on the size of the crowd. But I'm interested in who funded this thing because it looks huge. The stage is large. The whole context seems big. So who's financing this? Well, it turns out that Rededicate 250 is financed by Freedom 250, which is a taxpayer-funded celebration fund for events, I guess, like this that are supposed to be celebrating the 250th year of the American Revolution, of the American experiment in democracy. So taxpayer funded for a sectarian, a partisan thing. What is this? What does the word rededicate mean? Well, if it's in an evangelical context, then dedicate and rededicate are words that, sort of Bible speak. Dedicate yourself, rededicate yourself to the Lord. It's a spiritual dimension, but it's specifically jargon attached to evangelicalism, which takes us to the New Apostolic Reform, Paula White and the Pastors for Trump, and that whole thing that is under the belief that America, like Canada, was founded as Christian nations, Canada and the United States, to which any student of history and Constitution or British North America Act or the Constitution Act will tell you that though there were predominantly Christians back in the days when Canada, 1867, America, 1776, were founded, that just means that there were people who had a Christian belief dominating these settlements at the time, whether they were Catholics or Protestants, English or French or Spanish, it didn't really matter. Christianity seemed to be the religious flavor of the time. However, the founding documents, do not claim that either country is a Christian in its foundation. It's not designed to say Canada is a Christian nation or America is a Christian nation. It is founded by people who had faith, to be sure, but that's as far as it goes. In Canada, there was an interesting case. There were some leaders in the movement for Confederation who believed that they wanted the name the Kingdom of Canada because we were a monarchy under the British monarchy, and they wanted the word kingdom. But others thought that it was too provocative given that the United States just fought a separatist war to get independence, and that a kingdom is what they fought against. So we'd be poking the bear if we called ourselves a Kingdom of Canada. So instead they opted for the Dominion of Canada, which simply had a reference to a psalm and talking about the land and God having dominion over the land. Well, those claims, and Christians were there, doesn't mean that we are or were or ever have been. And because we are a multicultural, inclusive society, and multiculturalism really has defined Canada, and to some extent, to a great extent, the United States as well. E pluribus unum, out of the many, one, out of the many who come. And as the Statue of Liberty says, give us the poor, give us the orphans, give us the widows, give us those who have been downtrodden. And whatever the plaque says, you can check it out for yourself. But it's the shining light on a hill, the beacon of democracy and opportunity and support for the newcomer, for the downtrodden. And that's sort of where we are. But if you say Christian, you'd have to have a pretty big time explaining how Christians, in their drive to move west, young man, and cross the Mississippi into the prairies, how their efforts to expand were Christian. Because we do have a number of examples of massacres, of violence, of things not going in a very Christian direction as these countries expanded and grew. So Rededicate 250, I'm not sure that you're barking up the wrong hill, that you want the United States to be a Christian. That means you're going to exclude everybody who does not agree with you. You're going to be white and right and evangelical. I'm not sure that that's the American vision from 1776. It may be the current national reform, new apostolic reform view. It may be the Christian nationalist point of view. And Rededicate is certainly a spiritual thing that they want to accomplish. In Canada, I think there's the same mistake. It is not a Christian country. No matter how much you wish to go back and make it so, it is not so, and perhaps it's even a good thing that we are not, because we can be inclusive. We can follow a Jesus teaching of helping the poor, of uplifting the widows and the orphans, and we need to focus on those things, not on making people, force them to believe as we believe, but accept people on some kind of basic human level. We're all in this together, regardless of what you believe. And our ethics, though they may derive from religious documents, has to be based on treating people with kindness, with fairness, with truth, and justice for all. The Jim and Terry Show, pondering things strange. Bye-bye for now. It's complicated, this relationship I have with my morning coffee. It's from the way that I